I stood in that hospital corridor just after dawn, the fluorescent lights above flickering as if impatient for me to move. My mother's voice, sharp as a cracked whip, echoed between the empty benches. Her hands were folded in front of her, pressing the threadbare fabric of her dress knuckles white. She never raised her voice in public. Growing up, she'd said it wasn't proper, but now frustration cracked her composure. "You're sick in the head, Maina," she hissed, her glare cutting into me. "Even now you want to chase those photos, while your father lies in there. What will you feed him with? Lens caps and film." I felt the air thicken, the distant smell of antiseptic stinging in my throat. In the room behind us, my father slept, tubes emerging from his arms like hollow snakes. His chest moved in shallow mechanical rises and falls. My Uncle Samuel cleared his throat, shifting his considerable weight against the peeling paint of the corridor wall. "You're a grown man, eh? Why are you still chasing boyish hobbies?" he said, shaking his head. "Photography, as if that will buy us medicine." A few aunts clustered at the end of the corridor, arms folded, lips pursed. They didn't speak, but the way they exchanged glances said enough. I pressed the camera bag tight against my side, my mind racing. The familiar, silent rebellion I'd nursed for years stirred again in my chest, anger edged with fear. My finances had evaporated into my father's hospital bills months ago. I should have sold the Nikon slung across my chest long ago, used the cash for antibiotics or groceries. Every family gathering turned into a tribunal. My so-called dream, laid bare and ridiculed in front of relatives who worked for government offices or ran small businesses selling phone cards and snacks. Still, I could not give up the camera. The idea kept me alive. That if I kept moving, kept shooting, one day I'd prove them all wrong. "Do you hear me, Maina?" my mother barked again. I looked at her and then down at my hands, twisting the fraying black strap of my camera bag. "I hear you," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I wish you'd listen. Dreams do not put ugali on the table," she shot back. I stood there, nausea and shame knotting in my gut, unsure if defiance or fear was stronger. My father's faint, erratic breath seemed to echo down the corridor, mingling with the overhead buzz and the muted cries of nurses coming on duty. I told myself right then, if there was any way out of this, it would be through the lens. It had to be. The weeks bled together. I woke before sunrise, wandering Nairobi's downtown with my camera. I sold anything of value at home except the gear. Relatives stopped calling. It was easier, I thought, to disappear into the city and its traffic jams, its hawkers, matatu touts yelling for fares. No one asked about my father's bills anymore. The doctors hinted that we were running out of credit and patience. My only solace was the camera. The cold click of the shutter was a command to forget hunger, forget disappointment. I focused on markets and alleys, minibus drivers with faces lined by sunlight and exhaust. I crawled between crowds at Gikomba Market, waiting for a shot, a mother slapping flour off her apron as she haggled with a butcher, an old man squinting at lottery tickets through cracked lenses. Nairobi didn't care for the ambitions of a broke photographer, but it was the backdrop to my stubborn faith. I started uploading photos to small competitions, nothing, then one day an email. A low-key photography collective, curated by a respected Dutch artist, wanted to feature one of my portraits, a young girl pressing her nose against a taxi window, sunlight turning the glass into gold leaf. They offered me a paltry sum, barely enough for a week's groceries. I took it and kept going. Days crawled by. My mother stopped looking at me when I snuck in to sleep on the couch. It took another year for a real break. A well-known travel magazine ran a special on the faces of Africa. They wanted to buy a series of mine, images shot in Kibra at dawn, steam rising over tin roofs, a boy balancing a jerrycan atop a pile of bricks. For the first time, money arrived, a few 100,000 shillings, enough to wipe away a fraction of the hospital debt. My father's health was improving by then, though he was smaller and quieter than before. A ripple of recognition began to spread online. Local galleries invited me for group exhibitions. I told myself things were changing, but each time I called home, the silence on the line told another story. "You should have been an accountant, Maina," my Uncle Samuel sighed one evening, calling to ask for loan repayment. "People can't eat pictures." Each success was greeted with suspicion or a lecture. My hands trembled when I put together my first solo show, scraping together money for frames, staying up nights in a friend's cramped flat, editing, weeping silently when I thought of giving up. My mother came to the opening but left early after glancing at the prices on the wall. Eventually, I outpaced my own small orbit. An international wire service picked up my work. Assignments came in. Droughts in Turkana, protests on Kenyatta Avenue, stories that hummed at the edge of violence and possibility. I stood behind barricades, shoulder to shoulder with foreign correspondents, telling myself every frame was a step away from doubt. 2 years slipped by. My father walked again, though he shuffled and coughed on humid days. When I called, my mother was civil, sometimes even polite, but I heard the reluctance in her tone. My relatives gave up public ridicule but never quite bought in, victory always hovering just out of reach. Then came the phone call that changed everything. A curator from the UK's National Portrait Gallery wanted 5 of my pieces for a new collection. They weren't just buying, they invited me to London, promised press, interviews, connection. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the offer on my phone screen, throat thick. I reread the email 3 times before believing it. For 3 weeks I lived between airports, Heathrow, Schiphol, JKIA, giving talks, standing before crowds that scribbled notes, shaking hands that didn't judge. My own reflection sometimes startled me. Cleaner clothes, confident stride, a hint of the hunger still burning underneath. My mother called once, asking if I would return soon. "Your aunt thinks you are living in a bedsit," she said, suspicious. "Show us what you are doing with your life." I promised I'd return. When my plane touched down at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, the city was caught in that restless lull before a thunderstorm. Grey clouds building over the Ngong Hills, the stench of rain on hot tarmac. I took a cab to my family's neighborhood, watching boda drivers weaving through traffic, children chasing footballs, women with baskets balanced on their heads, the city unchanged. I let myself in with the old key, a chipped bit of metal still sharp at the edges. Inside, it was as though time had barely moved. The couch where I'd once slept, the broken-legged table, the jumble of shoe racks. The familiar faces were gathered, all my aunts, my mother, Uncle Samuel, my younger cousins poking at their phones. Before any greetings, my mother barked, Maina, have you finally decided to come back? Or you finished chasing those British dreams?" Uncle Samuel smirked where he sat, arms folded. "Did you bring back something tangible or just another bag with camera things?" Their laughter rippled around the room, perfunctory and cool. I felt the tension knot inside my chest again, the same fear and defiance that had defined me since the hospital corridor. But this time I was ready. I took the brown envelope from my messenger bag, the paper thick with foreign postmarks. I drew out glossy magazine spreads, each featuring my photos. I laid out the invitation to the National Portrait Gallery, the press clippings from the BBC and The Guardian, the photo book contracted by a European publisher. As I handed them over, my hands didn't shake. Slowly, the room quieted. My mother's fingers trembled when she traced my byline beneath a full-page portrait. "Maina Oshino, Nairobi. Photographs by Maina Oshino," she read aloud. Her mouth opened, shut again. Uncle Samuel hesitated, then scanned a certificate with gold embossed letters. "They gave you an award." "Yes, Uncle, and an exhibition in London." He handed the paper to my youngest cousin, trying to hide his astonishment. The kid grinned, eyes wide. "Uncle, you're famous." In that moment, the tide shifted. The cousins put down their phones, craning to see the magazine photos, talking over one another. "This is you. This was in Kybra. Did you meet anyone famous?" Even my most skeptical aunt flipped through the press clippings, murmuring my name. I felt something collapse, a weight sliding from my shoulders. All the years of being told that dreams were worthless, every snide aside or cold silence, faded in the face of concrete proof. The pictures were as real as anything, more real, perhaps, than the sting of their old rejection. My father shuffled in from his bedroom, the sound of applause from the TV draining away as he entered. He saw the feverish circle around the coffee table, the magazines, the certificates. He picked up a hardcover book, his eyes tracing the embossed letters. He looked up at me, his face softer than I remembered, smaller somehow in the glow of the overhead light. "Is this you, Maina?" he asked, voice rough. "It's me, Papa." He nodded, slow and thoughtful. "I always knew the world needed to see what you see," he whispered before pulling me into a brief, quiet hug. There were tears in my mother's eyes now, small and stubborn. She wiped them away, then held out her hand for one of the photographs. It was the shot that started it all, a girl behind the dusty window of a taxi, sunlight painting her ordinary face into something radiant. She nodded as if accepting some private, unspoken bargain. She reached out and squeezed my hand tight. That evening, the family buzzed with excitement. My mother cooked rice and sukuma wiki, bustling around the kitchen as if nothing had changed. But I caught her glancing at the magazines, at me. Uncle Samuel brought out his best whiskey. My aunties asked about London, the weather, whether I could get them each a small photograph for their walls. I sat on the stoop after dinner, the air thick with approaching rain. The world felt changed, a hard-won legitimacy in my pocket. I was no longer the brash dreamer mocked for his foolish ambitions. I was a son returned, concrete proof of a possibility once ridiculed. As twilight settled over Nairobi and the city's sounds softened, I realized I no longer needed to chase their approval. What I had done, what I had seen through the lens, was enough. Their disbelief had forged my purpose, shaped my hunger. But now I belonged both in their world and beyond it. I glanced at my father, who watched me from the doorway, and felt a first easy exhale, soft as dusk itself. For the first time in years, I was home.